police dog focused on the teacher's bag, barking repeatedly. She initially dismissed it. However, the principal's examination of the bag revealed a startling discovery that shocked everyone. Here's the account of what occurred. Before we delve into today's story, please leave a comment below indicating your location. And if you enjoy remarkable police dog stories such as this one, be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss future content. The autumn morning air felt crisp and clean. Officer Rebecca Martinez, known as Becca by her friends and colleagues, drove her patrol car into the visitor parking lot of Lincoln Elementary School. The large brick building, featuring colorful playground equipment and hand-painted murals, appeared welcoming in the early October sunlight. Beside her, Riker, her 3-year-old German Shepherd partner, remained watchful in his specially designed compartment, his dark, intelligent eyes following the children as they entered the school. "Ready for another school demonstration?" Becca asked, reaching back to scratch behind his ears. Riker's tail thumped against the seat, his posture remaining professional despite his obvious excitement. These community outreach events were his favorite assignments. He enjoyed the attention and the occasional treat sneaked to him by an admiring child. As Becca adjusted her crisp Oakland Police Department uniform in the rearview mirror, she felt a surge of pride in their 2 years together. She and Riker had established themselves as one of the department's most respected canine teams. His detection skills were exceptional, his obedience flawless, and the bond between them unwavering. These school demonstrations served a purpose beyond community relations. They offered an opportunity to inspire the next generation. Principal Harrison greeted them at the front entrance, offering a warm and welcoming handshake. Mr. Martinez arrived, stating perfect timing. "The assembly is all set up in the gymnasium." The children had been discussing it constantly all week. Becca trailed after him through hallways displaying student artwork and educational posters. Riker kept his heels perfectly aligned beside her. The gymnasium was filled with the eager conversation of elementary students seated cross-legged on the floor, their teachers positioned carefully around the edges. "Good morning, Lincoln Elementary," Principal Harrison's voice announced over the microphone. "Today we have some very special guests. Please join us in welcoming Officer Rebecca Martinez and her partner, Riker." The demonstration commenced without issue. Rebecca detailed Riker's training as he executed fundamental obedience commands, drawing expressions of admiration as he accurately retrieved objects and successfully completed a miniature obstacle course. The children watched attentively while Rebecca described how police dogs assist in locating missing individuals and identifying hazardous materials. "Could any teachers volunteer for our scent detection demonstration?" Becca inquired, presenting a training aid, a small canister containing a trace scent intended for demonstrations. Ms. Eleanor Winters, a petite woman with a neat brown bob and wire-rimmed glasses, volunteered among several others. As the respected 4th grade teacher approached, something shifted in Riker's demeanor. His ears perked up, and his body grew stiff next to Becca. Riker abruptly turned away from the training aid. His focus shifted to Ms. Winters' tote bag, located near the gymnasium wall. A low growl emanated from his throat, a sound Becca had never encountered during a school visit. "Riker, heel," Becca instructed softly. However, her partner remained focused, his growl evolving into persistent, urgent barking that reverberated through the suddenly silent gymnasium. The sudden change from a happy demonstration to Riker's forceful barking immediately created a noticeable tension throughout the gymnasium. Children who had been smiling just a few moments prior now appeared concerned, with some even moving backward on the gleaming floor. Ms. Winters paused in her step, her face losing color as Riker continued barking at her canvas tote bag. "Riker, stop," Becca stated more sternly, placing a hand on his tactical harness. The shepherd paused briefly but stayed watchful, his gaze fixed on the bag. 15 years in law enforcement, and 8 as a K-9 handler, had shown Becca how to understand her partners with remarkable precision. This wasn't enthusiasm or bewilderment, it was a practiced alert. Principal Harrison approached, his formal smile tight as he spoke to the students, who were beginning to whisper, "Perhaps we should take a brief 5-minute break? Teachers, please direct your classes back to your rooms briefly." The organized movement of 200 elementary students returning with their teachers allowed Becca a moment to consider the situation. Ms. Winters remained still, her fingers fidgeting with the silver pendant around her neck. "I am so sorry about this," the principal stated once the gym was clear, his voice quiet. "Ms. Winters is among our most valued educators, Teacher of the Year on 2 occasions. There must be some error." Becca nodded, keeping a professional demeanor as her thoughts quickly considered various explanations. Incorrect alerts sometimes occurred with all K-9 units, but Riker's performance history was almost flawless. Furthermore, she understood his alerts. This wasn't hesitation, this was certainty. "Eleanor, do you have any idea what might be causing this reaction?" Principal Harrison asked softly. Ms. Winters replied that she did not, but Becca observed her hand move as if to shield a bag. "Maybe some food would be nice? I brought banana bread for the teacher's lounge." "Food wouldn't trigger this kind of alert," Becca explained carefully. "Riker is trained for narcotics, certain medications, and explosives." The word explosives made Principal Harrison's eyes widen slightly. Ms. Winters let out a small, shaky laugh. "This is absurd. I've been teaching here for 12 years. Becca observed the subtle details most would miss. The slight tremor in Ms. Winters' right hand. She noticed the way her eyes avoided direct contact. Beads of perspiration appeared at her hairline, even though the gymnasium was cool. "Ms. Winters, with your permission, I'd like to check your bag," Becca said, keeping her voice calm and friendly. "It would resolve this quickly, and we can return to the demonstration." "I don't think that's necessary," Ms. Winters responded, taking a slight step backward. "This is embarrassing enough as it is." Principal Harrison appeared conflicted, his eyes moving between the esteemed teacher and the vigilant police dog. "Eleanor, perhaps it would be best to simply—" "Tom, this is absurd," Ms. Winters interjected, addressing the principal by his first name. "You know me." But Riker had started barking again, more urgently now, pulling a little against his harness. Something was clearly amiss, and Becca needed to discover the cause. Anxiety filled the vacant gymnasium as Becca recalled her initial day at the Oakland Police Department's K-9 Training Center. The memory remained clear. A brisk morning similar to today, with the sound of dogs barking throughout the training area, and her own apprehensive excitement as Sergeant Wilson guided her towards the kennels. Martinez was introduced to Riker, as he stopped before a kennel containing a young German shepherd with intelligent eyes and ears that appeared too large for his head. He had failed his first training program. The trainer said he was too independent, but she felt she saw potential in him. The question was, did she? She recalled kneeling before the kennel, meeting Riker's gaze as he studied her with an intensity that seemed almost human. Unlike other dogs who barked or jumped excitedly, Riker had simply watched, assessing. After she had finished speaking, "Hey there, partner," he moved toward the gate, his posture alert but calm. "Well, I'll be damned," Sergeant Wilson had muttered. First handler he hasn't growled at. Their training had been grueling. Riker's independence made him resistant to standard techniques, and Becca had endured several suggestions to request a different dog, but she'd perceived something in his stubbornness, a determination that mirrored her own. They had encouraged each other, tested each other, and ultimately established a pattern that evolved them from separate individuals into an outstanding team. Their significant moment occurred 6 months into training during a complicated search exercise. While other teams adhered to the standard procedure, Riker had abruptly changed direction, guiding Becca to a concealed training tool that had been inadvertently dropped during setup. The instructors had been astonished. The assistance wasn't included in the operation, yet Riker had identified its faint signal amidst numerous interferences. Subsequently, they had compiled a record that demonstrated their effectiveness. This included 17 successful drug seizures, 3 missing children located, and a reputation for precision that had established them as the department's preferred team for challenging investigations. Only recently, in the past month, they had exposed a complex smuggling ring at the port that had bypassed standard searches. However, there had also been resistance. Just last week, Lieutenant Garcia had questioned Becca's decision to search a home based solely on Riker's alert, suggesting she was too quick to trust the dog's instincts over human intelligence. The search had produced no results, a rare failure that still felt disappointing. Sometimes I wonder if we place too much faith in these animals, Garcia had commented afterward. They're tools, Martinez, not fortune tellers. The recollection reinforced Becca's determination as she confronted the present circumstances. Riker wasn't merely an asset, he was her colleague, and his current demeanor indicated a serious problem with Ms. Winter's bag. The recent increase in prescription drug abuse among teenagers heightened the worry. Several local high schools had documented occurrences within the past month, and stories were spreading regarding a structured distribution network. Was it possible this had extended to the elementary level? The thought caused her discomfort. Becca steadied herself, concentrating on the current situation, Riker's unwavering vigilance, and Ms. Winter's growing anxiety. Her years of training solidified into a firm conviction. This wasn't an error or chance occurrence. This was Riker acting precisely as he's been taught. Ms. Winter, Becca stated, her voice calm but resolute, I'm going to need to examine that bag. The teacher held her tote more tightly. This is entirely unwarranted and humiliating. I have personal items inside. Medication, personal items. Principal Harrison cleared his throat. Eleanor, please, let's resolve this so we can proceed with the program. The tension in the gymnasium was noticeable, thick like the air before a storm. Riker stayed focused, his training preventing him from approaching without instruction. However, his posture conveyed unwavering confidence. If your concern involves prescription medication, Becca suggested, I understand. You may present those details to Principal Harrison directly. Ms. Winters looked towards the exit doors. I would prefer that my private health details are not discussed within the school. This feels like a breach of privacy. Eleanor, Principal Harrison stated, lowering his voice to a worried tone, you have previously been willing to provide your migraine medication to the nurse. What has changed? She lowered her shoulders a little. All right. However, I prefer this handled in private, without a police dog creating a spectacle. Becca agreed. We can utilize your office, Principal Harrison. Riker will need to be there. His response initiated this. But we can be discreet. The journey to the administrative offices was quiet and strained. Riker kept his heel position perfectly beside Becca, but his focus stayed on the tote bag held tightly against Ms. Winter's side. Numerous teachers looked from their classrooms as they walked past. Upon entering the principal's office, Harrison closed the blinds and indicated the visitor chairs. Let's resolve this swiftly and professionally, he stated. Principal Harrison, please examine the bag, Becca requested, adhering to procedure by having the school administrator perform the search while she attended to Riker. Ms. Winter's hand trembled as she placed her tote on the desk, her face now pale. This was absurd, she whispered, but the protest seemed uninspired. Principal Harrison paused, then cautiously opened the bag. His expression changed from skeptical to confused to shocked as he removed items and placed them on his desk. A small plastic container that seemed to hold prescription pills, but without any pharmacy labels, 3 flash drives, a stack of papers resembling test papers marked with confidential state assessment stamps across the top, and lastly, a notebook filled with student names and what appeared to be payment amounts. Eleanor, Harrison's voice was barely audible. What is this? Ms. Winters slumped into a chair, her face hidden in her hands. It's not what it looks like, she mumbled. Harrison, his usual calm facade faltering, pointed to what appeared to be test materials that had left the secure testing room. Becca identified medication Adderall, recognizing the pills from previous cases, a prescription stimulant often abused to enhance studying and test performance. Ms. Winters looked up, tears tracing a path down her face. You don't understand the pressure, the persistent demands for higher test scores, the funding connected to performance metrics, she said. Riker, remaining alert, moved closer to the desk drawer, his attention moving away from the bag. There's more, Becca stated softly, gesturing toward the drawer, and adding, may I? Principal Harrison nodded silently, and Becca opened the drawer. Within it was another container of pills, distinct from the first. The medications were clearly labeled as prescriptions, issued to different people, none of whom were Eleanor Winters. I was simply attempting to assist them, Ms. Winters cried, referring to the struggling students, those experiencing anxiety, and those whose parents lacked the financial means. Were you distributing illegally obtained prescription medication to elementary school students? Harrison inquired, his voice devoid of emotion. It's important, just a few eighth graders, and then their older siblings at the high school requested it. Her voice faded as the full impact of her actions seemed to register. Oh, God, what have I done? Becca entered the hallway to call for assistance via radio, leaving Principal Harrison to observe Ms. Winters. The usual, somewhat disorderly atmosphere of the school day persisted around them, students and teachers oblivious to the events unfolding in the principal's office. Upon her return, Ms. Winters appeared calmer, although her hands still shook as she held a tissue. Lieutenant Wilson and other officers were en route, Becca stated. Ms. Winters, I'd like to examine your classroom, Harrison said, his expression still showing the impact of a trusted colleague's actions. According to our findings, Becca responded, observing Ms. Winters visibly withdrawing into her seat. Riker is still suggesting the possibility of more. 20 minutes elapsed before Lieutenant Wilson arrived, accompanied by 2 other officers. The school's hallways were swiftly evacuated, and a focus team proceeded to Ms. Winters' 4th grade classroom. The vibrant reading nook and inspirational posters created a striking contrast to the seriousness of the circumstances. Riker proceeded deliberately, moving around the room with a familiar expertise. Upon reaching the teacher's desk, he alerted once more, nudging at a lower drawer resembling a typical file cabinet. There is nothing further, Ms. Winters stated softly from the doorway, accompanied by an officer. Everything was contained within my bag. Becca inspected the drawer, observing an unusual characteristic regarding its size. This drawer is less deep than expected, she remarked. Her fingers discovered a concealed catch, which, when released, exposed a hidden compartment. The interior revealed further test materials, a small digital scale, multiple notebooks containing ledger entries, and a stack of cash carefully banded. Lieutenant Wilson softly whistled. This is a rather complex operation for a 4th grade teacher. Becca understood, leafing through one of the notebooks. The entries spanned 3 years and included various handwritings. There were also coded references to other schools in the district. The available information revealed a troubling scenario. A group involving educators and potentially administrators appeared to be altering test results throughout the district. At the same time, they were running a prescription drug operation. Medications were being given to students with assurances of improved focus and exam results, fostering a pattern of reliance and academic misconduct. Faced with further proof, Ms. Winters became overwhelmed. It began modestly, she wept, initially assisting a small number of students with early versions of study resources. Subsequently, Peterson at Northwood High suggested the use of Adderall, claiming his students showed a 40% improvement with pharmaceutical aid. The school district continually increased the performance benchmarks, warning that schools failing to meet the standards would be closed. Where are you obtaining the prescription medications? Lieutenant Wilson inquired. Crowley and the science department have access to the medical supply room, she replied. Andrews, working within the administration, made changes to the inventory records, she confided. Please recognize we were in a dire situation. The system requires unrealistic outcomes. And when schools underperform, teachers face job losses. Communities are negatively impacted. So you resorted to supplying drugs to children? Becca questioned, disbelief evident in her voice. Ms. Winters remained silent, her response only tears. As officers continued to document the evidence, Becca watched Ms. Winters through the conference room window. The teacher, formerly held in high regard, now sat slumped at the table, responding to Lieutenant Wilson's questions amidst tears. The woman's decline was remarkable in its speed, shifting from a valued educator to someone accused of a crime within a few hours. Becca's thoughts turned to Ms. Winters' personnel file, which Principal Harrison had provided while they waited for the search warrant. Eleanor Winters, 43, had grown up in Oakland's struggling East Side. Despite significant challenges, she obtained a teaching degree and returned to serve her community. Her initial performance reviews were filled with commendations for her commitment to students facing adversity. What became of the hopeful young teacher? The narrative unfolded gradually through Ms. Winters' confession. 5 years ago, the school district introduced new standardized testing requirements directly linked to school funding. Lincoln Elementary, serving a predominantly working-class neighborhood, had faced challenges in meeting increasingly demanding metrics. "You can't fully grasp what it's like," Ms. Winters had explained, her voice filled with a sense of exhaustion. "We are evaluated solely on test scores, without consideration for whether children are genuinely learning or developing." Last year, the school received notification that if scores didn't improve by 15%, the school would be closed and students would be reassigned to Central Heights. Central Heights Elementary, situated across the highway in a more affluent area, required an hour-long bus ride for many Lincoln students. The closure would have been devastating for working parents who depended on after-school programs and local support networks. "Initially, we implemented after-school sessions," she explained, supplemented with extra worksheets and practice tests. "However, our students were already facing significant challenges, many coming from homes where parents held multiple jobs, where English wasn't the primary language, and where basic needs weren't consistently met. The situation intensified as initial scores indicated only slight progress." It was then that Alan Peterson, a high school teacher encountering comparable difficulties, contacted her with a proposition: advance copies of test materials in exchange for guaranteed results. The scheme had developed over time. What started as sharing test preparation materials progressed to providing actual test questions. When that approach wasn't enough, Peterson proposed using pharmaceutical aids, such as Adderall and similar stimulants, to assist students in concentrating during exams. Initially, scores increased by 22%, Ms. Winters had confessed. "The district lauded us as an example of educational reform. Parents felt reassured that their children would not be transported across town. Teachers retained their positions." What Ms. Winters had not foreseen was the rapid escalation of the program beyond her ability to manage. Several other schools experiencing difficulties sought similar assistance. Students started asking for medication to be used outside of testing situations. This created a complex underground market disguised as a commitment to high academic standards. "I simply wanted to aid my students," she murmured. "I didn't intend for this to happen." Becca reflected, observing the distressed teacher. The road to misfortune is often paved with good intentions. By evening, Lincoln Elementary was engulfed in intense media coverage. News vans filled the street as reporters shared rapid updates concerning the teacher who had become a drug dealer. Parents assembled outside Northwood High School in worried groups, looking at their phones and quietly discussing the situation. The emergency school board meeting, quickly arranged in the district auditorium, was full of worried families. Superintendent Wallace stood at the podium, his usual confident appearance replaced by a serious expression. "We understand your concerns and share your shock," he began, addressing the restless crowd. "The actions of Ms. Winters and potentially others represent a profound betrayal of trust, but I want to assure you that we are cooperating fully with law enforcement and taking immediate steps to address the situation." These steps had already begun. Peterson from the high school and 3 other educators implicated in Ms. Winters' confession have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A comprehensive review of the district's standardized testing protocols was in progress. Grief counselors would be accessible to students at all impacted schools beginning tomorrow. The recent disclosures were particularly distressing for the families of Lincoln Elementary. Many had placed considerable faith in Ms. Winters over the years, recognizing her as a committed educator advocating for a school facing challenges. "My daughter adored Ms. Winters," Maria Gonzalez shared with a local reporter, her voice filled with emotion. "She received additional assistance after school 3 days a week. I now question the nature of those sessions." The school nurse had started collaborating with medical professionals to detect students potentially receiving unauthorized medication, although the complete scope was not yet known. Early information indicated that Ms. Winters had mainly focused on older students in the middle and high school levels, but several 5th graders were also involved in the situation as preliminary cases. Community leaders reacted swiftly. Councilmember Jenkins declared an emergency review of the district's performance metrics and funding formulas, and a local pharmaceutical company volunteered to sponsor drug awareness programs. Parent-teacher groups established support sessions to assist families in dealing with the disappointment. For Becca, observing the community's response evoked a range of feelings. The system that had placed pressure on Ms. Winters, despite the lack of justification for her reaction, largely remained unchanged. The same metrics, the same funding challenges, the same inequities would persist in schools such as Lincoln Elementary even after the scandal receded from public attention. How many more are there? Lieutenant Wilson mused, observing parents entering the auditorium. Educators who began with positive intentions but then violated boundaries they hadn't anticipated. The question remained unanswered, yet deeply troubling. The parking lot was dark and empty, the school long deserted, when Becca remained in her patrol car. Riker slept beside her, his duties for the day finished. His keen observation had uncovered a case that would probably extend far past Lincoln Elementary. She reached out to pet his fur, sensing his even breathing. "You did well today, partner," she whispered. "Really well." Riker opened one eye, responding to her praise with a quiet thump of his tail against the seat before returning to his rest. His absolute confidence in his abilities, his consistent focus on the job, were lessons Becca often thought about during her career. The radio was silent, the paperwork finished for now. During these calm moments between cases, doubt sometimes appeared. This isn't about Riker's capabilities, but rather about the systems they operated within, the complexities of human motivations, and the ambiguous situations their work often exposed. Ms. Winters wasn't a hardened criminal, at least not in the typical understanding of the term. She was an educator who had lost direction, who had eroded her ethical principles one incremental step at a time until she discovered herself on the opposite side of a boundary she'd previously considered inviolable. How many others existed, making comparable decisions, facing comparable pressures? Becca recalled her own difficulties as a new officer. The incentives to take shortcuts, to disregard issues for the perceived greater benefit. The pledge she'd made had steered her through those moments of uncertainty, just as Riker's training guided him through distractions and false trails. The contrast wasn't lost on her. An animal had demonstrated more defined ethical limits than a highly educated professional. Riker showed no interest in school budgets, performance metrics, or career advancement. His focus was on fulfilling the duties he's been trained for, cherishing the partnership they've cultivated, and upholding the straightforward distinction between right and wrong, a clarity humans frequently obscured with justifications. "Must be nice," Becca murmured, gently scratching behind his ears, observing his simplified view of the world. Their partnership had been established upon a foundation of trust, her faith in his instincts, his reliance on her guidance. Whenever confidence diminished, when personal reservations or political considerations or expediency became factors, the mission was compromised. The current day had emphatically underscored that understanding. Her phone vibrated with a message from Captain Reynolds. "Excellent work today. 5 additional arrests resulted from Winters' intelligence. This case will continue to broaden." Becca started the engine, glancing in her rearview mirror as Riker sat up, immediately vigilant. Despite the intricate challenges present in the continuing investigation, and regardless of the systemic shortcomings that had led to this circumstance, their course of action remained straightforward. Adhere to the evidence, rely on the training, safeguard those in need. Certain days, that straightforwardness proved sufficient. The morning sun reflected off the recently installed sign at Lincoln Elementary, proclaiming education through integrity. Principal Harrison stood beneath it, welcoming students with refreshed vigor as they entered the building for the spring semester. From their patrol car, Becca and Riker observed, having just finished their monthly visit, a new tradition that started unexpectedly. What had initially been a standard demonstration transformed into a recurring community engagement program, with Riker now quite well known among the students. A young girl with bright beads in her braids, Officer Becca, stepped away from the group, hurrying to meet them. "Is Riker coming to our class today?" Ms. Jimenez, the newly hired 4th grade teacher, smiled apologetically regarding her energetic student. "He certainly is," Becca confirmed, observing Riker's tail wagging a little at the acknowledgement. "However, recall our discussion. He's working, not playing," Zoe stated earnestly. "We are only allowed to pet him when you give permission." The investigation that commenced with Riker's alert had extended considerably beyond Lincoln Elementary. 17 educators throughout the district were ultimately involved in what the media called the achievement ring. This scandal resulted in the superintendent's resignation and a full revision of the district's performance evaluation metrics. Most significantly, it initiated a national discussion concerning the challenges confronting schools in underserved communities and the potentially harmful effects of funding exclusively based on standardized test scores. Ms. Winters had entered a guilty plea to several charges, including the distribution of controlled substances to minors, theft of test materials, and academic fraud. Her assistance resulted in a lessened sentence of 7 years, with a potential parole opportunity after 4, although her teaching career had concluded. Within the school, signs of transformation were apparent. The Testing Achievement Center had been renamed the Student Support Hub, now focusing on individualized learning assistance instead of test preparation. Parent volunteers managed a new after-school program. Funding from a grant provided by a local tech company supported comprehensive mental health services. "We're prioritizing genuine learning again," Principal Harrison said to Becca as they walked toward the assembly hall. "Test scores are important, but they don't represent the sole definition of success." The quarterly awards ceremony acknowledged progress in areas including academic growth, community service, and perseverance through challenges. The applause was thunderous as Becca and Riker were called to the stage. Officer Martinez and Riker conveyed an important lesson to the assembled students. Harrison stated, "Integrity isn't simply about adhering to rules, it's about acting ethically, even when facing challenges." While Riker performed a brief demonstration of his search skills, locating hidden training aids throughout the auditorium to the children's delight, Becca considered the changes initiated by One Alert Dog. Changes were underway, with priorities being reassessed and vulnerabilities being handled. Subsequently, as they got ready to depart, Lieutenant Wilson found them in the parking lot. "That press conference you gave last month gained national attention," he told her. "3 other districts have asked for our K-9 units to assess their testing facilities. They are referring to this as preventative measures." Becca acknowledged, observing Riker already concentrating on their next location. Prevention is always preferable to prosecution. As they drove away from Lincoln Elementary, Riker's head was held high in the passenger compartment. Becca felt a sense of completion. They hadn't just solved a crime, they'd helped set a community on a better path. Ultimately, that was what their partnership was truly about. Have you ever witnessed a working dog make an unexpected discovery, like Riker did? Their instincts often surpass our own understanding. Do you believe our education system places too much stress on teachers and students through standardized testing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed Riker and Officer Martinez's story, please subscribe and enable notifications by clicking the bell icon to stay updated on our daily K-9 tales. Share this video with anyone who appreciates these incredible working dogs. Don't miss our previous stories, currently displayed on your screen. Until our next episode, see you tomorrow, same time, with another extraordinary K-9 hero story. The funeral was silent, heavy with grief until the police dog acted. He jumped onto his handler's casket, and his subsequent actions left the entire room in tears. Here's what happened. But before we get into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. And if you love extraordinary police dog stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The October morning arrived gray and somber, as if the sky reflected the sadness of those assembled at Oakwood Memorial Chapel. A cool breeze stirred the nearby maple trees, their crimson leaves sometimes detaching to briefly swirl, before landing on the gravel pathway where numerous police cruisers were arranged in precise formation. Within the chapel, the atmosphere was thick with the combined fragrances of polished wood, floral displays, and the palpable stress of shared sorrow. Officers in dress blues occupied the pews, their badges adorned with black mourning bands. Their faces, typically hardened by years of service, visibly strained to remain composed as they observed the flag-draped casket at the room's front. Officer Michael Mike Reeves, 34 years old and an 8-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department, a recipient of 2 commendations for bravery, rested silently within the wooden box. An official portrait, positioned on an easel next to the casket, depicted a man with keen hazel eyes and a gentle smile that didn't fully convey a solemn demeanor. In the front row, Mike's parents were seated, visibly burdened by the sorrow of outliving their son. His mother held a handkerchief, while his father, a former officer, gazed forward. Next to them, Mike's sister Elaine dabbed at tears that appeared unending, her shoulders shaking with each inhale. Near the side entrance, a disturbance caught the attention of several people. Officer Terence Wilson worked to manage a Belgian Malinois, whose strong physique trembled with anticipation. The dog's golden-brown eyes moved quickly around the chapel, examining every face and every area, as if looking for someone expected to be present. "Easy, Ranger," Wilson said softly, tightening his hold on the leash as the dog made a low, mournful sound. Ranger had been Mike's partner for 4 years. Working as a team, they had located missing children, arrested dangerous suspects, and uncovered hidden contraband that could have gone unnoticed. They were the K-9 unit's most accomplished team. Now Ranger's ears twitched, his nose working intensely, showing uncertainty in his posture. 4 years prior, Officer Mike Reeves had been in the impersonal hallway of the regional K-9 training center, anxiously straightening his uniform collar. Following 6 years of patrol work, he received approval for the K-9 unit, a goal he'd held since his academy days. The training sergeant, a stern woman named Martinez with 20 years of experience visible on her face, guided him towards the kennels. She cautioned him, her keys making noise as they walked, not to become too attached too quickly. He would work with 3 prospects before final assignments were made. Some partnerships succeed, others fail. The dog's choice is as important as your own. A lively atmosphere filled the kennel area. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Dutch Shepherds were watchful in their enclosures. Martinez paused at the 3rd kennel, where a tan Malinois with distinctive facial markings stood rigidly at attention, amber eyes following every movement. "This is Ranger, 18 months old, imported from a European working line," Martinez said, observing Mike's reaction. "He has a high drive, high intelligence, and could be too intense for some handlers." A prior candidate found him unmanageable, describing him as too intense. Mike lowered himself to the dog's level, keeping eye contact. Typically, police dogs displayed immediate enthusiasm or aggression upon approach, but Ranger was an exception. He stayed perfectly still, evaluating Mike with a disconcerting intensity, as if peering directly through him. "Hey there, partner," Mike said gently. At those words, a slight alteration appeared in Ranger's stance. A minor change that only Martinez detected, his eyebrows lifting a little. The dog moved toward the kennel gate with careful steps, paused once to sniff at Mike's offered hand, then settled, holding eye contact. "Well," Martinez said, "that's certainly not what I expected." The bond was instant, though neither person nor dog could articulate it. When they started training together the following day, the other handlers observed in amazement as Ranger seemed to predict Mike's instructions almost before he voiced them. By the 3rd week, Martinez discontinued the rotations, formally assigning pairs. Their initial significant challenge arose 6 months later, a missing 10-year-old child in Oakwood Park. The search had been ongoing for hours, with numerous agencies searching the thick woodland as night fell and temperatures decreased. Mike observed Ranger assessing the scene, tracking a scent trail that other canines had overlooked. "He's detected something," Mike transmitted to the command post. "We are proceeding east towards the creek bed." Rain had begun to fall, washing away scent particles, but Ranger never hesitated. He led Mike through thickets and over fallen trees until they found the boy, huddled beneath an overhanging embankment, hypothermic but alive. Their partnership extended beyond statistics. Mike had remained single, his apartment becoming their shared domain. Morning runs continued regardless of weather. Evenings were spent reinforcing training exercises that had become more like games, their lives completely intertwined. Mike's parents had thoughtfully provided Ranger with a Christmas stocking, acknowledging him as part of the family. The 911 call was received at 2:34 a.m. on Thursday, reporting a domestic disturbance on Elm Street, a residential area of modest single-family homes. Dispatch records indicated this was the 3rd call originating from that address within the past 2 months, with prior incidents resolved without any arrests. Officer Chun was already en route, requesting additional support as per standard protocol. K9-7 was ready to assist, as Mike had radioed, with Ranger alert in the specialized compartment behind him. Acknowledged K9-7. The report indicated a male subject, possibly armed, with children present in the home. Mike's cruiser arrived approximately half a block from the address, maintaining dark lights to minimize the risk of escalation. Chen's patrol car was already on scene, positioned strategically to provide cover. Mike secured Ranger's tactical harness, and the dog instantly transitioned to working mode. Report, what is the situation? Mike, she said as they neared Chun, who was positioned behind her vehicle door, hand on her holster. The male subject was identified as Jacob Reynolds, age 42. His wife had initiated the call, stating he had been consuming alcohol and had begun threatening her with a handgun when she announced her intention to leave him. 2 children were present inside the residence, aged 8 and 5. The house appeared dark, with only a single light illuminating the living room. Abruptly, the front door swung open, and a woman emerged, holding 2 children, all still in pajamas. "He's got a gun," she gasped, as Chen directed them towards the patrol cars. He stated he wasn't returning to jail. A records check verified Reynolds had previous arrests for assault and unlawful possession of a firearm. The situation had progressed from a domestic disturbance to a potential armed standoff. Reinforcements were on the way, estimated time of arrival 4 minutes. Dispatch updated, SWAT alerted but assembling. "We might not have 4 minutes," Mike responded, observing movement at the window. The subject appeared increasingly agitated. Additional patrol units arrived, officers taking positions around the perimeter. Mike released Ranger's leash, giving him a hand signal to stay close, a command that would keep the dog within 3 feet without restricting his movement. They proceeded to the side of the house, utilizing shadows for cover. "Got a visual," Mike reported quietly into his shoulder. Mike's subject in living room, confirmed armed, handgun in right hand, appears highly agitated. Captain Walsh's voice crackled over the radio. "Hold positions."
Ostage négociateur en route.
Reynolds, however, disregarded the order. The front door exploded inward. A figure appeared against the light within, weapon raised. "Stay back," he yelled, swinging the gun haphazardly between officers. Reynolds discharged a stray shot that struck Chen's patrol car. Officers retreated behind cover, issuing verbal instructions but refraining from firing due to the family's location behind vehicles. Reynolds moved down the front steps. One now pointed directly at the group, including his wife and children. Mike assessed the situation instantly. Reynolds had an unobstructed view of his family. Officers lacked a secure vantage point, and the man's finger was closing on the trigger. Mike gave Ranger the silent command they'd practiced repeatedly. 2 quick taps on his thigh, indicating an apprehension attack. Ranger surged forward with explosive speed, a tan blur in the darkness. At the same time, Mike moved to flank, positioning himself between Reynolds and his intended targets. Reynolds noticed the dog approaching and redirected his weapon towards the new danger. 2 shots echoed through the night. Ranger connected with Reynolds' arm, the expertly trained bite causing the man to drop his weapon. Both men went down, but Reynolds managed to fire first, with a bullet impacting Mike's chest just beneath his vest. A second shot followed from Mike's service weapon as he fell, hitting Reynolds in the shoulder, disabling him but not fatally. "Officer down! Officer down!" Chen's voice broke over the radio as she hurried to Mike, who had fallen onto the asphalt. Ranger kept his hold on Reynolds until another officer secured the suspect, then immediately moved away from the scene, a course of action he would not typically take, and rushed to Mike's side. The dog whined, pawing at his partner's chest where blood was quickly spreading across his uniform. "Stay with me, Reeves," Chen urged, applying pressure to the wound. "Bus is 2 minutes out." Mike's breathing came in shallow gasps, his eyes finding Ranger's. He whispered, "Good boy," lifting a shaking hand to touch the dog's head. "Best partner ever." Ranger lay down beside him, pressing his body against Mike's side as paramedics arrived. They worked frantically, loading Mike into the ambulance, but the bullet had struck at an angle that sent it beneath the protective vest, severing a major artery. Officer Michael Reeves was pronounced dead at Riverside Memorial Hospital at 3:28 a.m. While emergency personnel desperately attempted resuscitation, Ranger stayed in the emergency room hallway with Officer Wilson holding his leash. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the trauma bay doors. When the doctor finally came out, shaking his head, Ranger appeared to comprehend before any words were spoken. His body drooped, the confident stance faltering as a howl began, a sound so intense, so resembling human sorrow, that seasoned emergency staff averted their gaze. Inside the chapel, the funeral service had commenced. Chief Roberts moved to the podium, his usual strong demeanor tempered by sorrow. Officer Michael Reeves represented the epitome of what it means to serve in the badge. He began to speak, his resonant voice firm despite the emotion evident in his eyes. During his 8 years of service, he demonstrated consistent courage, compassion, and dedication to this community. Nearby, Ranger's restlessness grew. Wilson held the leash securely, yet the dog's attention remained fixed, focused on the casket where his partner rested. The chief noted that Mike's devotion to his canine partner, Ranger, had forged one of the most successful teams in our department. Together, they were credited with over 200 successful operations, saving countless lives and enhancing the safety of our community. Mike's mother wept softly, comforted by her husband's embrace. His sister Elaine remained stiffly beside them, sometimes touching the canine unit pin Mike had given her last Christmas. Captain Walsh then stepped to the podium, recounting a memory of Mike's first day on patrol. He arrived 30 minutes early, his uniform so impeccably pressed it appeared it could have cut paper, Walsh remembered, prompting a few sorrowful smiles. When I inquired about his promptness, he stated, "My dad always told me if you're on time, you're already late." Mike consistently exceeded expectations. As personal recollections transitioned into the official ceremony, Ranger displayed increasing signs of distress. The dog breathed rapidly, adjusting his posture, and kept his gaze fixed on the casket. Wilson worked to manage the situation, understanding the importance of the moment, yet obligated to ensure order throughout the service. The department chaplain commenced the religious segment of the service, his words of comfort seeming inadequate given the sight of a flag-draped casket and a room filled with grief. Though Officer Reeves walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, the chaplain stated. At these words, Ranger emitted a low whine that resonated through the quiet chapel, and several heads turned, with expressions of understanding rather than annoyance appearing on their faces. The service continued with the presentation of Mike's badge and service weapon to his parents. The department's bagpipe player moved to the front, the poignant melody of Amazing Grace echoing through the chapel. As the bagpipes ceased, a quiet stillness settled over the chapel. The funeral director walked to the podium, ready to provide directions for the procession to the cemetery. Prior to speaking, Ranger's demeanor changed significantly. The Belgian Malinois froze, his body trembling as if electrified. His eyes fixed on the casket widened. His breathing quickened, nostrils flaring as he perceived something only he could detect. Every muscle in his powerful frame tensed, coiling like a spring. "Something's wrong," Wilson whispered to Martinez, tightening his grip on the leash. "He's never acted like this before." Martinez recognized the signs. "That's not aggression," she whispered back. "That's recognition." At that moment, Ranger initiated his action with a swift advance that surprised Wilson. The dog broke free of the leash held by his handler. Multiple officers reacted to try and stop him, but Ranger was too quick. His actions were deliberate and purposeful as he sped down the central aisle. A collective intake of breath spread through the chapel as the Belgian Malinois moved toward the front, his paws making no sound on the carpeted floor. Mike's mother emitted a quiet cry, his father partially rising from his seat. Chief Roberts prepared to proceed, yet Ranger's behavior created a moment of hesitation for all present. It wasn't a display of hostility or fear, it was a sign of clear intention. Ranger approached the casket and halted, inhaling deeply around its sides. Then, with the same effortless skill that had distinguished him during his service, he jumped up, his front paws landing softly on the casket's rim. For a brief instant, he maintained his balance there, his amber eyes assessing the gathered mourners as if awaiting consent, There was no movement and no sound. A hush fell over the entire room. Ranger, with deliberate motions, pulled himself completely onto the casket, his nails producing the faintest clicking sound on the polished wood. The American flag covering the casket moved a little under his weight. The dog turned once, then positioned himself on top of the casket, directly above where Mike's chest would be. "Oh my God," Elaine whispered, tears flowing down her face. Ranger lowered his head, pressing his nose against the wood. He took a deep breath, then released it in a trembling exhale that appeared to hold all the grief imaginable. His ears pressed against his head as he whined, a sound so sorrowful it seemed to permeate the very walls. "Should I?" Wilson began, taking a tentative step forward. Captain Walsh raised a hand, halting him. "No," he said softly, "let him be." The dog's behavior shifted from active to observant. He assumed the familiar alert stance he had held many times in the patrol car, watchful, protective, prepared. His gaze moved across the room as if still performing his duties, still safeguarding his partner. Ranger remained perfectly still, his chest rising and falling in a pattern that appeared synchronized with an unseen power. The first shock among those grieving subsided into a deep silence, not distressing, but respectful. Then Ranger performed an action that shifted the moment from poignant to truly unforgettable. With deliberate slowness, he lifted his right paw and pressed it flat against the American flag, precisely over the spot where Mike's badge would be on his uniform. He maintained the position, unwavering, resolute, and clear. Elaine reacted with a gasp, her hand covering her mouth. "The salute," she breathed, her voice just audible to those close by. "That's Mike's special signal." A quiet buzz of conversation arose within the chapel, as those familiar with the meaning shared it with others. 3 years prior, Mike had developed a distinctive training cue with Ranger. It was a discreet signal, used exclusively between them, a customized gesture that Ranger would execute only in reaction to Mike's particular hand movement. This was not a component of regular police K-9 instruction. It was intimate, unique, and shared solely by them. Officer Chun, who was present the night Mike passed, moved closer to Captain Walsh. "Mike's last touch," she whispered, her voice cracking. Prior to the ambulance arrival, he touched Ranger's head in the manner he always used when issuing that command. It wasn't simply a gesture, Martinez explained softly to those present. It represented their method of conveying a message, signifying mission accomplishment when verbal communication was impossible. I have never observed another team exhibiting such a profound connection. As Ranger held the salute, his gaze remained steady and observant, as if anticipating additional direction. A profound quiet settled over the chapel, punctuated only by quiet weeping from Mike's family. Mike's father rose abruptly, his action capturing everyone's attention. The former officer moved toward the casket deliberately, maintaining a dignified posture despite the sadness visible on his face. He halted near Ranger, standing respectfully without touching the dog. Then, with careful control, he performed a formal police salute. "Mission accomplished, son," he said, his voice thick with feeling but audible in the still room. One by one, each uniformed officer in the chapel stood and repeated the gesture, a multitude of salutes recognizing not only their deceased comrade, but the connection they were observing. Even civilian mourners rose, palms on their chests, accepting something beyond common comprehension. Ranger maintained his posture for a few more seconds, then gradually lowered his paw. He adjusted his position near the casket, turning to look at Mike's father. The dog's ears rose, his keen eyes observing the man's face. "He was so proud to be your partner," Mike's father said to Ranger, his voice a quiet murmur. "Every day he told us how fortunate he was to have you." The chaplain, who had been observing with evident feeling, moved forward once more. "In 20 years of service to the department," he said, speaking to those present, "I have conducted far too many ceremonies like this one. I have never seen such a demonstration of the connection between an officer and his canine partner." He paused, regaining his composure. "It seems there are relationships in this world that even death cannot break." The chaplain's words appeared to fill the chapel, offering solace where it had seemed impossible just before. Mike's mother, who had been almost devastated, stood a little straighter, her gaze fixed on Ranger. Mike frequently claimed the dog understood everything, she stated, in a voice audible to those around. He asserted Ranger could occasionally read his mind. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. I believed he was overstating things. Chief Roberts approached the podium once more, his own demeanor noticeably strained. I believe we should modify our proceedings, he remarked, glancing at the funeral director. It seems Ranger will be with his partner for the rest of the service. Throughout the service, Ranger stayed on the casket, a quiet protector watching over his companion. The funeral director, showing impressive flexibility, modified the arrangements to accommodate the dog. The customary pallbearers were in place, though questions remained regarding the concluding procession. We need to proceed to the cemetery shortly, the director said to Captain Walsh. Walsh responded with a nod, then moved towards the casket with deliberate steps. Ranger spoke softly, mirroring the tone he had often heard Mike use. We need to take Mike now. The dog's ears twitched at the familiar name, his amber eyes following Walsh's movements. He remained still, shifting his weight and settling more firmly atop the American flag. Mike's sister, Elaine, rose from her seat, dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue. She walked towards the casket, her steps unsteady but resolute. She had observed the strong connection between her brother and his canine partner from the very beginning. She recalled numerous family dinners where Ranger sat at Mike's feet, and holidays where the dog received gifts alongside everyone else. Ranger, she said softly, extending her hand palm up, mirroring the gesture she had seen Mike use many times. It's okay, boy. The Belgian Malinois' attention turned to her, his nostrils flaring slightly as he analyzed her scent. The scent was close enough to Mike's to be recognized as belonging to his family. His ears moved forward, his head tilting as if assessing the situation. Mike would be so proud of you, she said, her voice cracking. You were the best partner he could have wished for, the best friend. Something in her words, or perhaps her tone, appeared to connect with the dog. Ranger looked from Elaine to the casket below him, then back to her. A quiet whine came from his throat. It wasn't a sound of distress now, but of inquiry. I know, she murmured. I miss him too. With extreme gentleness, she placed her hand on the dog's back. Ranger tensed briefly, then relaxed into the touch. Elaine stroked his fur, mirroring the way she'd seen her brother do after their shifts together. We need to take Mike to his resting place now, she explained, speaking as if the dog understood every word. Perhaps he did. Will you help us do that? The chapel remained utterly silent, with everyone holding their breath as they observed this private moment. Ranger regarded Elaine for a considerable time, then rose slowly and deliberately. His movements were measured and respectful, ensuring his stability on the casket's curved top. For a brief moment he stood rigidly, resembling a dog in peak condition. Then, with a grace that moved many to tears, he descended from the casket, stepping gently onto the carpeted floor near Elaine. Wilson moved forward with the leash, but Elaine halted him with a raised hand. Let him walk with us, she said, with no restrictions. Mike would have wanted it. Chief Roberts gave his consent, and Wilson moved aside. The pallbearers arranged themselves, raising the casket with coordinated precision. As the solemn procession began its descent down the central aisle, Ranger stepped alongside the casket, positioned at heel, precisely where he would have walked beside Mike during patrols. Outside, the autumn air held the fragrance of rain in the distance. The hearse door closed with a quiet finality, sealing the last chapter. Ranger watched, a flicker of confusion returning to his stance. Wilson approached, anticipating the dog might need reassurance, but before he could offer the leash, Ranger acted. The Belgian Malinois walked purposefully to the police motorcycle that would lead the procession, Mike's motorcycle, now solemnly draped in ceremonial black bunting. Ranger settled beside it, adopting the familiar posture he'd used countless times when Mike was getting ready for their shift. Captain Walsh looked at the motorcycle officer who would be leading the procession. Can you accommodate him? The officer, who had previously worked with Mike and Ranger for years, responded immediately. It would be an honor, sir. With care, the officer assisted Ranger into the specially adapted sidecar, designed for K, 9 transport during parades and ceremonial events. The dog relaxed, his demeanor alert yet composed, as if accepting the situation. Upon arrival at the cemetery, the concluding ceremonies proceeded with military formality. The honor guard conveyed the casket to the gravesite, with Ranger following closely, still unrestrained but maintaining impeccable control. The chaplain offered concluding words of solace as the casket was placed. As the formal folding of the flag commenced, Ranger observed with unwavering attention, following each action. The carefully folded triangle was given to Mike's mother, who held it close. Next, the rifle salute occurred, 3 volleys that echoed through the autumn air. Ranger reacted slightly at the initial shots, but remained in position. By the 3rd volley, he remained perfectly still at attention, seemingly acknowledging the respect being shown. As the bugler played taps, the somber notes lingered in the air. Ranger advanced 3 steps. With careful movements, he lifted his paw again, pressing it against the casket in that customary salute, a concluding gesture between comrades that moved many to tears. When the final note subsided, Ranger retreated, then settled down near the gravesite, his chin resting on his paws. He remained steadfast until the last mourner had left. The cemetery gradually emptied, with mourners departing in small groups, many taking a moment to look back at the striking scene. A devoted dog kept watch near his partner's final resting place. Mike's family were the last to leave the gravesite. His father knelt beside Ranger, placing a calloused hand on the dog's back. "You'll always have a home with us, boy," he said, his voice thick with feeling. Mike would have wanted us to support one another at this time. The Belgian Malinois looked up at him, its amber eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that went beyond the boundaries of species. He shifted a little closer, acknowledging the bond, then turned his attention to the casket now being placed in the ground. Captain Walsh came forward, taking off his formal hat and holding it to his chest. He stated that the department had considered Ranger's future. Traditionally, canines are retired after their handlers pass away. Mike's mother looked up sharply. He was too young to retire. Too skilled. Walsh nodded. "That's what we believe as well. With your permission, Officer Wilson has volunteered to become Ranger's new handler. They already share a connection, and Wilson initially trained with Mike." Elaine wiped away fresh tears. Mike would agree. He often said Wilson was the only other officer Ranger seemed to truly listen to. As if in agreement with her words, Ranger stood, shaking his coat slightly. He glanced between the family members and Walsh, then purposefully moved to stand beside Wilson, who had come closer quietly. "I'll never replace Mike," Wilson said, his voice faltering. "I wouldn't attempt to, but I pledge to you and Ranger that I will respect their partnership in our work together." Ranger looked once more at the gravesite, his stance conveying a sense of finality, an acceptance that had not been visible previously. With deliberate movements, he turned and walked beside Wilson toward the waiting police vehicles. He did not look back. As any good officer would, he was moving forward, carrying the legacy of his fallen partner with him into whatever missions awaited. The bond between a canine officer and their handler exemplifies one of the most sincere partnerships in law enforcement, founded on absolute trust, steadfast loyalty, and a connection that transcends verbal communication. The final tribute given by Ranger serves as a poignant reminder that profound feelings are often conveyed through actions rather than words. Have you ever observed a moment where an animal appeared to comprehend death or loss in a manner that seemed inexplicable? What fosters such strong connections between humans and their canine partners that they can surpass even the final parting? If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like and share it with someone who appreciates the extraordinary bond between handlers and their canine partners. These incredible dogs risk their lives alongside human officers every day, demonstrating courage and loyalty that deserve our recognition and respect. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story about police canine heroes. Our collection of true stories about dogs keeps expanding, with new videos added each week to display these extraordinary collaborations. Please view the suggested videos currently displayed for additional moving narratives that emphasize the steadfast commitment of police dogs nationwide. We will also see you again tomorrow at the same time with another fresh video.